And again, welcome to Bit Depth. I'm Santiago Ramones. Across from me is...
Sabra.
Awesome. How do we know each other?
Well, I met you at a photo shoot, actually. This is the first time I remember you.
Yeah.
It was the annual photo shoot for Cosplay. You were, I believe, Marshall Lee.
Yeah, it was.
And Sable was Fiona. And I was keeping all company while you were taking pictures. It was such a good time.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Oh my gosh, I remember that. And that's my favorite memory with y'all.
My usual first question, although that's kind of become my first question, how do we know each other? But my actual first question is, what do you do?
I work in a funeral home. I work between several funeral homes. I do everything from picking up the deceased to burying them in the ground. Everything in between, paperwork, any financial ends that I have to deal with the families. I do all of that.
That is, I mean,
it's kind of
I don't know,
morbid.
what's the usual reaction that you get whenever you tell people?
Why are you like this? Usually it's one of those, how can you, like early in the mall, we met somebody and I told them what I did and they were like, how are you so positive? I don't understand who are you? Yeah. Are you okay? Like, yes. And a lot of people just wonder why I chose that field.
Sure.
So I ended up going there. I wanted to do it in high school. And my first reaction was, I don't have to deal with people, which I'm right, but I have to deal with people in a different sense.
Sure.
So, I mean, there's still the communication. I have to deal with grieving families. You see every kind of reaction, and you have to understand that this is one time for them.
Right.
Whereas you see this every day.
Yeah.
So their reaction, it's always anger, sorrow, bargaining. You get anything, really. There's no telling who's walking in the door next.
Right. I guess, what made you want to do it?
What drove me to it is I never really got the opportunity to say goodbye to a lot of people that I grew up knowing. My neighbor passed away, and I went to his service, but when I saw him, he didn't look like him. And it always bothered me, so I wanted to go into a profession where I could change and hopefully make it look like they're sleeping instead of somebody just laying in the box.
Right. Yeah. And there's, I mean, I guess over time you just kind of realize that the whole process in between is really different.
Oh, yes. It's very different. But every time it's very interesting. Every different scenario that you run on, any kind of reaction to chemicals. I mean, everything. You see it. It's just, you have to know how to change what you're doing in order to adapt.
So, in a weird way, what's your favorite part of that job?
It always sounds bad when I say what my favorite part is. I like when I can be in the room when they're aspirated. And it's basically a rod where we just, I don't know how to explain it without it sounding bad. We puncture all of the organs and we cover them with a cavity fluid to preserve what's left so that they stay the way they are and don't start rotting earlier. But that's my favorite part, and I don't really know why. It's just I like being in the room when that happens.
I mean, it's always hard to kind of think about because, like dead people. But at the same time, it does sound really cool.
It is. I promise. I'm not always morbid, but you definitely have a new respect for people that are in that field. You're like, oh, wow, you really had some times. I don't know how to describe them, but there's some times.
Right. So I think that in some ways a lot of that is kind of based on like culture, and that the way that we sort of culturally and socially want to treat the dead. So how is that perspective sort of either sustained throughout working this job or made you think like, oh, these are the things that I want done whenever I'm like...
Well, for me, going through all of the steps, I feel more like I should be cremated. I don't want to be burdened on somebody else's. And for me, cremation is cheaper alternative. I don't want somebody to spend thousands of dollars on me just for me to go in the ground.
Right.
That's my perspective. But I understand that people choose not to be cremated because it's their religion. They don't believe that they should be burned. Then there's others like Native Americans. They believe in having a wake before the service, which is basically a funeral the night before the funeral.
Yeah.
And those can last anywhere from 2 hours to all night.
Right.
And I've been on both of them. And usually they look at me and they're like, oh, white girl, you don't understand. But I do understand. Everybody approaches it in a different way. Letting go. Some people, I've seen them where they're detached the moment they walk in. They're already said their goodbyes. They're done. They don't want anything else to do with it. But I've seen it where people, they want to follow their culture and respect the dead and give them proper burial. And it's just interesting to see all different cultures come into it.
Yeah. And then there's like, what's your least favorite part?
Sometimes the removals are my least favorite part. It depends on what the scenario was when I get called out. Because I'm not a big fan of being out in the mud, but I've been knee deep in mud before, and I'm not just a fan of being covered in anything.
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, what tools do you have available for taking care of that?
For removing?
Yeah.
I have a cot and I have a backboard, and it's me out there. Usually, this recent one that I went on, I had the officers out there with me, and they were like, oh, we've got them in a body bag. We'll just put them on there for you. Like, I can do this. I can remove them myself. And they're like, no, we'll do it. They pick them up themselves. Usually it's just the cot and the backboard, though. That way I can slide them off the bed, slide them out from the bathroom. I've seen people fall in the corners. Where there was one that fell in the bathroom, and their hallways were narrow, and we had to get a sheet, put it under them, and drag them out the hall just to get them on the cot. Yeah. But that's just because we couldn't get the cot back there. But it's definitely just those two things and rubber gloves.
Dang.
So, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, bodies are heavy.
Yeah, and I mean, you get everybody from weighing about as much as a bird does to not weighing as much as a bird does. Yeah. But usually if it's heavier than I can lift, I take somebody with me. Right. Which usually I can lift anybody that weighs about 170 to 200 before I have to get help. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting as well, just thinking about, so to get already philosophical here, do you fear death at this point?
I do not. I to be honest, I've knocked on death's door too many times to fear death. Yeah. So at this point, it's more like I've accepted if anything does happen to me at this point in time, I've done everything that I would want to do. I've made peace. I know that if I go today, I don't have regrets. But I always tell my mom jokingly that I'm going to come back and stack her chairs. So she's not going to like me very much when I'm gone, but I think I'll be entertained.
Right. And then in some ways, seeing the different ways that people go, does that make you more careful in certain things?
It definitely does. I don't like to text and drive. It makes me nervous. If somebody else is texting and driving, I kind of go on a berserk streak and just start yelling. Right. But that's because I've picked up one too many. I've seen people that have blown past stop signs and just gone under semis. And when you see that, it definitely makes you more aware that you need to pay attention to what you're doing. And it may not always be you. It may be a drunk driver swerves into your lane, but it makes you more aware for sure.
Yeah. 'Cause, and then I guess, eventually you just get like desensitized to it. And I mean, earlier we were talking about how like horror movies,
they don't even bother me. I just kind of laugh at them. I think they're funny. I do. I go to the theater just to make fun of them, to be honest. Like,
yeah.
Well, that was predictable.
Right. So I guess at this point, like, what scares you?
I don't think anything really scares me. I mean, the one thing that bothers me is crepitus, the crunching of bones. But that's the only thing. Like, nothing really scares me.
Yeah.
Usually I work late at night at this funeral home. And if I'm there, doors are locked, you hear things, see things, and you just know, somebody's here with me, I guess, and keep going. But I don't think twice about, oh no, is this murderer coming to get me? At this point, it's more like, please come get me. I'm ready.
There is a lot of across lots of different cultures. There's a lot of focus on fear of death and fear of like pain or whatever. So what is I guess a perspective that you have on what people are afraid of?
I think people are more afraid of the unknown. Death, they don't know if it's a definite ending. They don't know if there's a life after death, if we're just here to roam the earth, if there is a heaven or a hell. They're not really sure. So I think they're afraid of where they're going. Whereas if it's a younger person, like say you or me, they say that it's more because we're afraid of mangling our bodies, which I don't believe that's true. I think it's more of we don't know what's next, what the next step is. And for me, I know that wherever I go, I'm going. It's just going to be a party where I go.
Right.
But I'm not really sure if people look at it as a celebration. Some do, and some just look at it as just a definite, there's no more, I'm going to be a tree in the next life. So,
which mentality has sort of helped people?
I find the mentality that helps people is when they believe that there is a heaven. People will tell them, well, they're at peace now, they're resting, they're no longer in pain. And that really does help a family when they hear that. And they believe grandma's up partying with Jesus. And I've heard people say she's up there drinking with Jesus. And I'm like, I don't think Jesus would drink. Maybe. I don't know.
He drink wine.
Maybe wine. But they were talking about like Bud Light.
Oh,
they put a Bud Light in the casket and I was a little concerned for it. But I mean, it's just different perspectives from families. I really don't know. It's hard to tell.
Because then you also deal with the grieving families and what sort of they're going through and sort of what seems like who's having the hardest time.
Usually it's the mother that has the hardest time that I've noticed. Children don't really understand. They understand to an extent, but they have to be explained to a different way that dad or mom are not here or your brother or sister. The mother always grieves the most because I feel like she spent more time with the child in the pregnancy and everything than anybody else. But I've also seen where the father has had a harder time than the mother. But in that case, it's usually the mom.
Yeah. So what can you say to help? What can anyone else do or say to help?
There's not really a lot you can say or do to help. I find that people saying, I'm sorry for your loss, upsets a lot more families because they don't want to face that they've lost somebody. But if you just simply say, I'm here for you, that helps more than anything because they know that they have somebody they can go to. They can call you. They can show up at your doorstep.
Yeah.
They just know you're there.
Yeah. So then... and I'm sorry,
No, you're
I've been
okay.
trying to, it's always a hard thing whenever I'm trying to listen and think of the next question at the same time.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
So then how do you think that culturally we can sort of improve the process of going?
Like passing on,
Well,
or
how people can cope with it.
how people can go about coping. Honestly, that's a hard answer. It really is, because people deal with it in different ways. Like, some react with anger. Honestly, I think if they looked at it more as the person's fulfilled what they had to do on this earth, they had a purpose, whether it be to touch somebody else's life, even if we were passing, somebody in passing, they may have affected us by saying one kind thing. I think if they look at it as they've fulfilled their purpose, their lesson to us, that it'd be easier to let them go.
Yeah. How does someone prepare for either a loved one passing away or themselves passing away?
It's really hard, because some people do make prearrangements, and they've come to terms. They've gone through their last stage is acceptance. They've gone through anger, denial, depression, and then they'll finally hit that stage, and they're like, I've had a good life. But I've seen them come in, they'll make arrangements, they'll pay for it ahead of time so that it doesn't burden anybody else. But it still never makes that process easy.
Right.
I've seen the cancer patients do this, and somebody it was his wife that a few years ago, she had cancer, she pre-needed everything, and up until the end, she would do her hair and makeup just to make herself feel better. And she wanted her husband and her kids to know she was okay.
Right.
And I mean, it was only earlier this year he passed away, and now it's just his kids left. But his kids were like, we had them for a good time, and we'll always remember them. We have all the videos, the pictures. But I don't think there's really any way we can prepare for death.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, again, I talk a lot about culture because it does focus a lot on that. And there are different, if you look at the Egyptians or something, how they literally had their entire lives preparing for it.
Yeah, and then they have all their belongings with them.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think.
But then, how do you feel, this is sort of like, I don't know, a weird millennial question, but how do you feel that like people our age sort of treat that differently?
I think people our age, it's hard to tell if they're afraid of the end or if they're ready for it. Like, I always jokingly say, just take me out.
Right.
But at the same time, I know where I stand with all my beliefs. But it's hard to say if everyone is actually afraid of it. It's hard to tell if they've gone through something that they're just like, I can't do this anymore. I'm done. Get me out of here.
Right.
I'm through. Or if it's just one of those, this is a speed bump. I'll keep going. Millennials, I think we have a harder time dealing with it because growing up, we weren't exposed to suicide as much as we are today. So I think it's kind of become wildfire, honestly. In my perspective, it's wildfire.
Right.
So I think they see that as more of an answer than it is a solution.
To sort of like try and ease into something less negative or, I don't know, somber. What is, I listened to a podcast a while ago, and the host's mother was dying, and he did a podcast with her before she died. And something that I noticed is that there's a lot of paperwork.
Oh my gosh, yeah. There's a ton of paperwork that has to be done.
So like what is on that list?
You have to make sure that you have, first you'll start with your name, your date of birth, place of birth, parents' name, parents' maiden name. Oh my gosh, I gotta think all through it. There's, if you were married, never married, single, widowed, there's highest education, where you went to school, basic history of your life, just for the obituary. Then you go down and you list all your survivors. So like your mom, your siblings, your dad, cousins, if you feel like listing cousins. Most people don't, but I've had people do it.
I have so many cousins.
I know. I've had people hand me like 2 pages worth, and I'm like, who are these people? They're our cousins. Okay. But I mean, just your family. And then in the end, they'll decide what church you want to go to, what minister. And then you have your Social Security paperwork. If you have teachers' benefits, if you have veterans' benefits, it all plays into it. It's just a mountain of paperwork that I get.
Right.
But I look at it and I'm like, I know what information I need. I highlight what I need and then flip it to the next page.
Right.
And it all goes in a computer to me and I send it off to a doctor.
Sure. But then there's also, like, you have to close bank accounts and I don't know, all sorts of other accounts and explain to them that, no, I will no longer be needing this because I am dead.
I am dying. We have to get death certificates for them, actually. For a bank, they need a death certificate. Social Security, insurance companies, car titles, all of your house titles, everything has to be changed over to your beneficiary. So you have to go get a death certificate for that. In the state of Oklahoma, the death certificates, I believe, are $15 a piece. And I'm like, oh, that's about $90 you're looking at if you just get a few of those. But, I mean, they do go pretty far in the long run, but it's a piece of paper.
Right.
That's how I look at it. It's a piece of paper that's stamped by the state. But it does say all of your information that you can use so that if somebody later on down the road, say you decided to do genealogy, you could go back and find your grandfather's death certificate and go from there.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, it is strange that there's so much tedium involved in...
Oh, yeah. You'd think it'd be a little bit easier since it's the end.
Right. On a lighter topic, we do cosplay.
Yeah, I do. I love cosplay.
How'd you start doing that?
I got into it when I was 19-year-old. If I can talk, I'm 19 years old. Somebody actually invited me to a convention. They didn't want to go alone, and I was like, what's cosplay?
Right.
I knew I wanted to dress up as characters from these shows when I was younger, but I didn't think that it was actually a thing until I was invited. So I went to Tokyo and Tulsa, and from there it just kind of sparked my love for it. I was like, I need more of this. And then the people I met there were always so pleasant. I've met a few over the time for negatives, but my first experience was all positives. People were so excited for a new cosplayer. They were like, yeah, welcome. This is what we do. We'll show you everything. And from there, I fell in love with it.
Yeah.
The whole community's great.
Who was your first costume?
Oh my gosh. My first one was terrible. I was in the Hitalia fandom. I still am, but I did Neo Canada, so Neotalia Canada. So, like, I didn't even have a wig. I just curled my hair. My hair was bright blonde at the time. And I made the jacket myself, and I was so proud of that. But now it's like, I can actually sew. Please don't look at those pictures. Like, let's put those away.
Right.
No one look.
What's your, like, big, lofty cosplay goal?
Oh, I have so many dream cosplays. I have to think about that. Because I have a list at home.
Right. But what's the one that you're like, I want to make that so bad, but I'm never going to make that?
Oh, my gosh. I'd have to look. I think it's Madoka from Madoka Magica. I think it's her god outfit where she has the wings and the galaxy under the dress. I've always wanted to do that, but I'm like, not today.
Right.
Maybe next week. And then you touch it the next week and you're like, maybe 10 years from now. Not today.
What's the one that you're proudest of?
There's so many. Right now I'm proud of Saber. I've ended up putting a lot more work into it than I expected, but I'm working on the armor right now, and I'm really proud of how it's all turned out. So I'm continuing to put more work into it. You know, I'm proud of her. Then there was another one, but I have to really think about that because I have too many.
Right.
I think Ventus from Kingdom Hearts. I was pretty proud of him when I got him done. I was so excited to go to the photo shoot. My poor trio, they were like, where's Ventus? Because I'm late to everything. So I was like, I was just napping in the corner. That's fine. I didn't want to be here anyway, Tara.
So what is the best part of cosplaying?
I think the reactions you get from people, whether it be other cosplayers or people on the street, if when they recognize you, there's just that light that comes to their eyes, and it just their whole face lights up, and they're so excited, and they run up to you and hug you, and they're just telling you about their love for this character. And I think that's honestly the best part of it for me.
Yeah.
It's just, I love that feeling so much.
Yeah, because people... I mean, we even saw it today.
Yeah.
We are recording this on the Friday of Wizard World Comic Con. So, like, I mean, on the way back to the convention center, we saw a full Mr. Meeseeks guy, and someone just, like, rolled down their window and just, like, yelled out the car, like, "I'm Mr. Meeseeks, look at me." And so, like, people... I don't know, people like either lose control or just like get really excited about it and just like, oh man, I love this thing so much, I'm going to yell at you.
It's great though. Like no matter how many times I've been yelled at, it never ceases to stop like startling me. I'm always doing something, but it's always a good feeling because you're like, somebody loves me. Somebody out there loved me. I may not know who you are, strange person, but I love you too.
Right.
But
what are some guidelines that you can give to some admirers as to how they should treat cosplayers?
Please ask before you take their picture or before you hug them.
Yeah.
I know I personally don't like being attacked with hugs just because I've broken my leg before and I don't care to repeat that. But definitely I don't want my makeup on you. I don't want your makeup on me. And I don't want to break a prop. So just be really courteous and, of course, give cosplayers breaks. We do work hard and we do love being seen and having our picture taken, but we like to eat too and we like to have our downtime to ourselves. So just be courteous. Those are the main guidelines. But I don't think there's really anything else that I can think of that I can tell them other than that.
What's sort of the less good part of doing cosplay?
Oh.
Let's do 3.
3. My least favorite part is getting harassed by either gender for wearing anything that shows slightly more thigh or slightly more skin than what's normal. I don't like to be followed around the con. Like earlier, I had a gentleman ask me if he asked for my contact information. I'm sorry, I can't remember it. And I said, well, I can give you my social media. And he was like, are you one of those Rule 34 cosplayers? Which I'm a little, no thank you, sir. I don't like that very much. Or people that just don't understand or read social cues. Like I try to be as polite as possible when I have to go somewhere. I'm like, I can't stay and talk, but I'd love to talk to you later. But then they follow you into the bathroom or follow you to your hotel room and you're just kind of like, I just wanted time alone.
Right.
And the third is just definitely people on the internet. I don't think they understand all the hard work others put into their cosplays, but they love to be the first ones to criticize every little thing you do. I just honestly wish that they would not.
Yeah. 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 It costs a lot of money and takes a lot of time and effort. So, like, to immediately shut down someone's hard work in any sort of art form is just...
It's hurtful.
Really crappy to do.
Yeah. It's like, don't do that. Stop that. I just want to get a stop sign and just be like, stop. Don't do that.
Well, there's a good meme of the guy who's holding a big clock and he's saying it's time to stop.
I forgot about that meme.
So then what pointers do you have for people who are starting to do cosplay?
Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't give up just because something doesn't look right the first time. Try again. I mean, never hurts to try multiple times to fix something. But if you get to a point, don't be afraid to reach out and ask. And definitely don't be afraid to talk to cosplayers that you admire because honestly, you can make new friends that way. And if you spend your whole time admiring them, you'll never get the actual friendship from it. You can admire them and be their friend. But just reach out and don't be afraid of what others think.
Yeah, I mean, generally a lot of times whenever we go to conventions, it's this weird thing that's like, hey, we're all here for the same reason. We like the same things. And so it's a kind of a like you're probably more likely to become friends with these people anyways.
Yeah, absolutely. It's easier to become friends with them. You see them in the same fandom and you're like, oh, we like the same
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
And it's easy to kick off a conversation and maybe you have more in common than you knew.
Mm-hmm.
And that's always a blast to find out, I didn't know you knew that fandom or I didn't know you liked this. It's always an adventure.
Yeah, yeah. But at the same time, we also deal with the stranger people, in that people get sort of, I don't know, people are less socially experienced. Is that a nicer way to put it?
Yeah, that's I think that's about as nice as it'll get, but we do get the eccentric ones. And I'm not really sure. I still have yet to figure out how to deal with those properly. I try my best and I just smile through. just smile and stare. You're just like, okay, I don't really know how to respond to that, but I'm doing my best. Please don't be
Right.
mad at me.
I also think that just an important guideline in general is just some form of consent. Consent to, hey, yes, again, like take your picture, but like, I don't know, for people that are following you or people that are asking for your information, just making sure that you ask and know that it's okay.
Yeah, always ask first. I don't mind being followed on social media. It's always
Right.
nice because it's like, oh, hello, I'll be your friend. Just contact me and we'll be friends. But if you're just going to ask for my number, like right off the bat, it's a red flag. Like, please
Right.
don't, because I've already had problems before with stalkers. I don't need more.
So what's the best part of being involved in this sort of nerd culture?
The best part, oh goodness, besides the excitement that lights up people's faces, I think it's just feeling like you're finally a part of a family. Because we all have our families at home, and you always kind of feel like you don't fit in with them because they all like all these different things. But then you come to a convention, and suddenly you have your convention family. And there's always that one that's always making sure that you've drank enough water, ate enough food, or have your medicine. And there's always the con mom. But it's definitely my favorite, besides everything else, is the family that I have, the family I've formed with friends.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think a lot of our best friends are through conventions or through this sort of culture that hopefully eventually the friendships can grow into something slightly more than just cosplay and nerdy things.
Oh yeah. And those friendships are always the best too. Once you get outside of it, you're like, you just want to lay on the couch and watch TV? Yeah, let's just lay on the couch and watch TV.
Yeah.
Like, all right.
And then how has cosplay and this sort of convention stuff affected your job and then vice versa?
I try to keep it away from my job just because like at work I'm silent almost. I don't really talk at all. Whereas at cons, I'm very outgoing. I'll talk to everybody and then I'll go back to this bleak world and be quiet. I try not to let them blend too much, but they know what I do and they're like, she's just an oddball. But I guess people end up liking me more because I have a more positive vibe. But I feel like cosplay, I can be more confident in everything I do. And at work, I'm confident in my skills.
Right.
But there's two different kinds.
Sure. No, yeah, I was going to think of a different question, but no, that's pretty much that.
That's okay.
So, bridging into the second half of this podcast, what is the role of spirituality or religion in your life?
Mine is complicated. I just tell people it's just complicated. I was born to a Catholic family.
Mm-hmm.
Then we left and we were Baptist and then Pentecostal. I just believe there's somebody out there, but I don't know what religion I fall under. I believe that you can worship at home without having to go to a church. But I do believe.
Yeah. What's sort of been that experience sort of navigating through different faiths and almost different cultures with it?
It's an experience. Because you always see the different. I come in from different religions, seeing this is how what Catholics believe in, this is what this believes in, this. And you're sitting there and you're like, I can understand why they do, but it's like, what made you think that? But then you all read a similar book and you're like, where did you derive that? Explain, because I want to know too. But for the most part, I just look at it like everybody's got their own color and we all are just painting a picture.
Right.
So no matter what happens in what book or where we are, we all end up in the same place, hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
What sort of led you towards kind of navigating towards a more ambiguous point of view there?
Let's see. When I was in the Baptist church, I ran into a group of what I called Bible beaters. And it was people that if you didn't read your Bible, if you didn't have this brand of Bible, they didn't like you. Was not my favorite. So when we went to the Pentecostal church, I went from being quiet in church all the time to people speaking in tongues and running across the pews. It was kind of scary for a 16-year-old. I was a little terrified when they started chasing the devil out of the church. I was like, do I leave? Do I stay? What's going on? But from there, I realized, I don't really like to conform to all of these. You need to be here at this time and do this. I'd rather just go about my day knowing that there's somebody up there. And if I really feel alone, I can talk to somebody. But for the most part, I don't feel like we should be confined to a building. We should be out there just experiencing life, not pushing it on anybody. Just say, if they're having a hard time, I know something that can maybe help.
Right.
I'm not going to say it can definitely help because maybe it won't. But
yeah,
I mean, it's just an easier way to go about things.
I mean, has it been, I don't know if beneficial is the word, but I guess, has it been beneficial or helpful or whatever to sort of have that more open point of view?
I find that it has been. A lot of people, if I ask them to, they'll sit down and explain what they believe in, and we understand that there's differences, but I find that if you're more open to it, they'll be more open to talking to you. Whereas if I was like, oh, no, only one, it would be like, I can't go here anymore. I have to leave.
Right.
But I found it's just interesting what other people believe. Even if you don't believe in anything, it's always a different perspective.
Yeah. Has the exclusivity sort of been a problem, or are you okay with leaving it where it is?
I'm okay with leaving it where it is. I mean, they've had their fair share of problems that I've avoided. I'm just negate away from it.
So then, I mean, has your family or something been okay with, I guess, stepping farther away from that, or?
So far they have been. In the recent years, my family has stopped going to church as much, except on Easter or Christmas. So they call them the Easter bunnies when they show up. But it's really hard at the same time because my stepfather's dad is the preacher at the church.
Oh, yeah.
So he constantly comes over and he gives them Bible lessons, and I just kind of disappear. He's like, where'd that kid go? I don't know where she is. She just disappeared. But yeah, it's been different now that we've kind of taken a step back from the church, and we don't have to feel like we're missing something if we have to work on Sunday instead of going to church. I don't feel as guilty.
Right.
So there's definitely that.
Right. Speaking of guilt, how have you sort of lessened the amount of guilt that comes from that?
I try to live as honestly as I can, so I'm kind of blunt with my answers sometimes with people. I try to sugarcoat it, but it doesn't work, so I just straight line. But as far as feeling guilty about the church, I try not to, because I'm like, if they really cared, they wouldn't be throwing a tantrum about me missing church. They would probably reach out and say, hey, are you okay? Instead of being like, why weren't you in church? Why didn't I see you in the pew? Like, definitely don't feel as bad whenever they start kind of interrogating me on why I was at work and not there.
What have been sort of the good parts of sort of growing up and being religious, and how has that affected sort of how you treat other people and how you sort of moral decisions in that way?
Like moral decisions, I know one thing that stuck with me was love thy neighbor. And it's always stuck with me. And I always thought, do unto others as you would have done unto you. And I always thought, if you treat somebody with kindness, surely they'll be nice to you. And growing up in the church, I always believed that, because there was your church family and then there was your family. But I never really fit in with the church family. And I can tell you stories about church camp that weren't very good. But I just know that for me, it was easier to step away from who they were. But I still make my decisions based on do unto others as you would have done unto you.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to be the one rude thing that sets somebody else over the edge. I'd rather be the one ball of light that keeps like hopping by.
Yeah.
Even if I'm here one moment and gone the next, at least they'll know she said something nice to me. I don't remember what it was, but she was nice.
Right.
Yeah.
What are some of the good ways that you sort of act that out in your life? How be good to people?
For me, it's reaching out when I see somebody's hurting. If I know somebody's hurting, or if I can kind of pick up a feeling that something's not right, I'll reach out and say, you can talk to me, or I'll call somebody late at night and talk to them. I will go out of my way if somebody's struggling. Like if I see them at the funeral home and I know they're struggling, I'll go by after work and sit with them for a few hours and talk to them and see exactly where they are and if they are okay. Because I don't want anybody to have to suffer.
Right.
I'd rather have everybody happy if I can.
And I mean, that obviously affects how your work goes, because it's
it all ties
you
into
have to help
it.
people.
Yeah.
So I guess I wish I did this more often on the podcast, so I'm going to do so. Sometimes I just try to clear things up as far as specifics so that more points of discussion happen. So first one is God ?
I believe he's there. I don't know what he's doing, if he's playing with a chess game with us or what, but I believe he's up there. I just don't know what his plans are for me yet.
And then sort of whatever logistics of that are, it's good to be honest and ambiguous about it. I appreciate that.
No problem. No problem. I'm I don't want to start fights.
No, and that's not really the intent that I have in asking the question. It's more about perspectives and what people believe and how and why is important to how they go about in the world. So then free will ?
I believe we all have our free will, so if you choose to believe, that's on you. But I find that every choice that we make is based on something that we've made in the past. Maybe something in your past repeats itself in the future and you deter away from the choice you made before.
Yeah.
I believe that free will is just like a game for us.
Mm-hmm.
We can choose which path we'd like to follow depending on how we think it will play out.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody, say I walked outside and was like, oh, there's somebody needing money on the street. If I hand him money, how will my kindness go into that? Will he go off to buy food, or will it be drugs, or what goes on from there? But it's all defined on the choices, and that's all based on him.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe free will is a thing. So if you believe, he's not going to force you to believe, but he's just going to let you do your own thing and follow whatever path you're meant to go on.
Makes sense. And then I would be remiss if I didn't ask about politics in this time. And so how have politics and that sort of, I guess, dilemma affected sort of a moral point of view that you have, I guess, through that political context?
I feel like politics is so corrupt. It drives me crazy. I get in fights with my parents over it all of the time, especially during campaigning, whenever they were campaigning. My parents and I would go round and round to the point I would just be like, I'm leaving. You're not going to see me for a month. And they wouldn't for months on end. I was that mad over it. But politics, as far as morals go, I feel like it's more corrupt. And I don't really like where it's going. And I'm kind of scared of what we're going to end up with. So.
People's behavior has been scary and intolerant during this time. And it's also been scary in the opposite direction as well. People calling for white genocide, which is interesting, to say the least. So, I mean, what are some sort of, I guess, guidelines as far as like, what do you think would help people and help them to feel equal or feel like they're taken care of or whatever that is?
That's a hard question. I'm like, how do you make people feel like they're taken care of? Definitely equality needs to be addressed. I mean, if it's something that goes on for white, it should be the same for everybody. It shouldn't just be like, oh, well, they get more benefits, just like gender equality and all of that. I think that would help.
Yeah.
And I don't know about the gun issue. It's just everything that's going on these days is so much. And it's all at once. It's not like it's over time. It's just all in a short period, and it's so stressful. I'm not really sure what a correct answer would be for that.
There isn't one. I just want one.
I don't have one. I'm panicked.
Right. But I think the people's perspectives and the way that people lean in that regard also affects how we would interact in the real world. And I think that's something that's very important to discuss, that if someone believes that I shouldn't have rights because I'm brown, or if someone believes that someone else shouldn't have rights because they're disenfranchised masses. But like it affects how we interact with people and how we treat each other with respect. So then how have you used these moral guidelines throughout your work?
Throughout work, I prefer to treat everybody the same. I'm not going to treat one family better than another just because they have money or because of the color of their skin or where they come from. I try to help everybody out in the best way I can. If it's helping them choose an option that works better for their payments, or if it's for this or that or what they feel comfortable with. I'm not going to force somebody to do cremation if they can't afford a funeral. But I'm also not going to put a $10,000 bill on somebody that can't afford it.
Right.
So every family is different, but I try to I don't try to cheat them. Oh my gosh. Try to treat them all the same.
Right.
And definitely you see it more with people of color. Whenever they see somebody like me walk in a room, it's instantly like hatred. And I never understand that because I don't hate you. I don't walk in and just instantly glare at you the moment I see you.
Right.
And once they get to talk to you, they're like, oh, you're not so bad. But I don't understand what the prejudice is with all of us. I just wish that everybody could be treated the same all across the board. Just
right.
No discounts if there's no discounts, but I'll work with you the best I can.
Yeah,
that's how it affects me at work.
I guess I might as well just go for the last question. What advice do you have for people?
Advice in general, I'd say just be kind. We don't know what tomorrow is holding for us. We don't know where we're going to be, who's going to walk out the door and end up in a car wreck. We don't know. Be kind to everybody. Treat everyone the way you'd want to be treated.
Right.
Always reach out and just do your best to be the best person that you can be. That's all I'd say to anybody.
Yeah. Thank you for doing this with me.
No problem.
It's been a weird roller coaster of different things. Where can we find you and your things? Plug all the things.
All of the things. Oh my gosh. You can find me on Instagram at American Beautiful, just like the song, just one word. You can find me on Twitter at Miss Americo. You can find me on Facebook as Miss America Cosplays or American Beautiful Cosplays. If you look up either of those, you'll find me. And usually that's where I tend to linger for the most part.
Yeah. Definitely find and follow her. She does some excellent cosplay. You're a beacon in the cosplay community of being like bright and helpful and fun, as well as you look damn good.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, is there anything else to plug or anything else to say about yourself?
No, I'm kind of a boring person. In my perspective, I'm boring. But it's been an honor to be able to come on here. I know it's been a day. I know we're all tired, but I was really excited whenever I got to join you for this, whenever you asked me to. And I'm always excited to see you and Sable and everybody. And I'm just looking forward to the next time we can all get together.
Yeah, me too. So I'm Santiago Ramones.
And I'm Sabra.
You can find me and everything that I do on my website, santiagoramones.com. I do this podcast. I also make music. I recently put out a demo. It has 6 songs. It shows that I can write songs with words as well as other things. And so the stuff that's on my SoundCloud is all my composery stuff, but the stuff that's on my Bandcamp is songs with words. And you can pay $0 or you can pay $100. I don't care. I mean, you can do whatever you want, but like, if I have to pay taxes on how much money I'm getting from writing songs, that would be neat. But yeah, I end every podcast with my 3 things. They shape my life philosophy and the way that I act and treat people in the world. And those 3 things